Well, good afternoon. It is officially 5 minutes after noon. Pretty sure you guys are going to give me a sound check within a couple seconds. I got my Game of Thrones dragon mug right here because we're going to be talking about dragons. Sounds good. Excellent. Excellent. Life is a game of chess, guys. I know some of you are some of you very an extreme minority of you have been kind of alarmed, but don't be. Everything is a game of chess. And if you think I'm going to let anybody anticipate my next moves, it's not going to happen. So, like I said, in 2023, I told you guys, when 2024 comes, just kick back and enjoy the show because that's all it is. It's a show. And already there are clowns revealing themselves. And it's cool. It's all good. It's all good. So, we're going to let a few more people stack in here. This is a really hot topic. Origins, beginnings it's always a hot topic. On my channel, I have gone into extreme depth showing you guys in book after book after book. I mean, I'm in a library right now, packed full of books. There's so many I can't fit them on the screen, but it doesn't matter. In 100% of all the reference books that I have on Sumerian, Akkadian, and Assyrian antiquities, 100% of those texts are written ex post facto. Just like I've shown you that 100% of all the histories of the world were all written and recorded ex post facto. Ex post facto is Latin. For those of you who don't know, it means after the fact. This is a key to understanding how our historical narratives have been passed down to us today. In every incident that we receive traditions about certain patriarchs and certain deals, it's always hundreds of years after that individual lived. So in the majority, almost all, matter of fact, all histories that are writing about time periods before are post-reset narratives. This is the value that Archaics has brought to the community. And I know, I mean, I'm not talking about the critics because we have a lot of critics paying attention now, trying to figure out what a lot of the latest controversies are. They don't have a clue. And I don't blame them. They don't have time to review 640 presentations. I get it. But the amount of data that is in the Archaics presentations that shows all of our timekeeping systems, all of our calendars, legends, traditions, lore, faiths, belief systems, fables, everything was recorded long after the events they depict. And this is why the frames of reference are primitive. This is what happens. We've been technologically advanced before. Were we technologically advanced in the Younger Dryas period? I don't know, because I haven't seen any evidence of a Younger Dryas period. It itself is still a theory. Archaics only goes back to the recorded historical record, 5239 BC and afterward. We don't have any reason to look at 5240 BC and beyond because there's nothing in the human historical record that can show us anything that happened beyond this point. Even 5239 BC is itself an ex post facto imposition of an understanding of the ancient Anunnaki Ner chronology, a chronology that Archaics brought to the table, not Zechariah Siton, not any of these Sumerologists, I found this in old text, and I cited these sources for you to know that the Anunnaki highly regarded a 600-year period. And that 600-year period is astonishing because it makes sense of the Kali Yuga, it makes sense of the Yuga periods, it makes sense of the Sumerian, these long periods of days. Because 600 years, an Anunnaki Ner is precisely 216,000 days, turnings of the stars, what we know of as shars. So if you take two of these Ner, that's 600 plus 600 years. And it solves the mysteries of how the Mayan long count was originally a part of the Sumerian system and the Vedic system. They were all one calendar. And I've showed multiple presentations where all the calendars of the ancient worlds synthesize. They synthesize in one key period during the vapor canopy and during a 21-year period of the life of Enoch, who was, according to the Judaic and rabbinical and Talmudic sources, was a chronologist. He was an architect. He was a mathematician. He was an astronomer. Yeah, he was a prophet. Because all of these are interrelated. It's basically a cross-disciplinary approach that Enoch took in order to do the things that he did. And we know Enoch has been named many things. He has many titles in the ancient world. It doesn't matter what somebody is called. It's what they did that identifies who they were. And if we can pull up 9 or 10 different traditions that all say the exact same thing, but they gave it a different name, that's just the ex post facto imposition of a cultural title that was put on an older tradition. We do it all the time. So it's this is the world that Abram was born into. Abraham was born 292 years after a terrible reset known as the Great Flood. Now, was it a flood as the book of Genesis depicts? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The story of Noah and the animals on the arks. This is a Jewish oversimplification of misunderstanding older Babylonian records. See, that's what this guy did here. He is one of many scholars, like one of my favorites, Lenormand. I've told you guys about Lenormand many times. I have a book by Lenormand from the 1800s here. But this guy here, this is a reprint from my publisher, Booktree in San Diego. But it's original. You remember how he does it. He doesn't redact. He publishes these books exactly the way they appeared. This one's from 1897. You can see how old it looks because it's a facsimile. My publisher is a reprints publisher. This is how I was educated partially with so many old books while I was in prison because my publisher sent me so many. It was just providence. After I had exhausted my supply in the prison of all these old books and old libraries, and you guys know I had some blessings, especially at Eastham, where we found hundreds of books from the 1800s, and I got to read them. And then from the old Bonnie and Clyde, it's from the old Bonnie and Clyde library. I got blessed. But then when I started exhausting my supply, and my dad was always sending me old books when I was in prison, then around 1999, I came into contact with the book tree, and it was nothing but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of titles of old reprint books, and they were facsimiles. This is a facsimile of the original, so it's not redacted. Photographed pages. So I read hundreds of them. This is one of the books I read in prison. I wanted to bring it back to your attention. I have cited A. Palmer Smith many times. He's one of the major scholars of the time in the 1800s who was showing in his research that much of the Old Testament comes straight from ancient Babylonian cuneiform texts, just like this. Ancient Babylonian cuneiform. I wish my screen would clear up. It shouldn't be blurry like that. Let me try something else real quick. Different light angle. This is ancient Babylonian cuneiform. And my camera is blurry. I've held objects up there before that didn't blur out like that. There it is. There it is. I can't hold it too close. For some reason, it's just not acting right. I don't know why it ain't acting right. There we go. Babylonian cuneiform. So we have A. Smythe Palmer here in this beautiful book, Babylonian Influence on the Bible and Popular Beliefs, a comparative study of Genesis 1-2. All right. Even my Archaics veterans are going to learn some stuff out of this book. Remember, we have a situation where we have a people who are taken into captivity by a more advanced culture. The Babylonians invaded the Canaan region and they took the Judahites into captivity. They destroyed Jerusalem and they took the Judah. Well, the Jewish priests had access to the Babylonian libraries. So while the people were deported and transplanted somewhere else, because this is what empires do in order to maintain the integrity of their own security, they displace peoples and put them on their frontiers to protect them from other alien peoples. So this was a very common practice in the ancient world, and the Jews found themselves as living in Babylonia, spread through all the Babylonian cities, but they were essentially free. And they come into contact with these amazing libraries, temple libraries in Babylon, and it baffled them. The Jews had they were so close-minded, and you get this all throughout the Old Testament. They are so close-minded, they really believed that they were the center of the universe. They were the center of God's kingdom, God's creation. Everything focused around the Jew. This is how they believed. So it was amazing culture shock to come into contact with bigger palaces, bigger temples, a greater infrastructure, bigger populations. They had not seen this. They were so close-minded. They had not seen this, and now they're in the middle of this thriving Near East metropolis. And in Babylon and in Calna and in Assyria, they come across these amazing libraries. And in these libraries, they learned about the world before the flood. And in these libraries, they found references to the race of Adamu and Kava, in the Akampendu, the people who in sorrow roam. And they found out about basically two major competing socio-political systems in the pre-flood world. One of them was a 10-king government. The other one was a 7-king government, and they were apart. They were two separate civilizations. I don't know if they're at war or not, but they're totally different competing civilizations in the pre-flood world. And they were known for different things, and they ended up being recorded in Genesis not as the governments that they were, but as patriarchal genealogies, which they weren't. That is Jewish invention. And they started by creating somebody named Adam, but they borrowed that from the old Babylonian Semitic word Adamu, which is just a general term that means mankind. The feminized form of that is Kava, but that's just Eve. So they created this dichotomy. There was a separation of the real, and they injected the imagined. And they learned all about this great serpent in the sky, and how this great serpent was a keeper of information. It was a keeper of knowledge. It was even attached to the idea of time and of survival and of resets. And they took this idea of this serpent and they put this serpent in and mixed it in with other stories about the pre-flood world, where a race called the Anuna, and I'm going to show you from this book, the Anuna of Gi, the underworld. It's all in here. They were known as masters of the underworld. And when they came up, they built these places called walled enclosures. This is where we got our Edens from. This is where the Jews got the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Garden is just walled enclosure. But these places, Edens, are mentioned in the Sumerian records. So the Jews in Babylon had totally mixed up this entire story, got all these details, and they created this narrative that's been passed down to humanity in the form of the book of Genesis. But it's fiction. It's creative nonfiction because it was based on core facts. So this is what we're going to be talking about in this deal. I have a lot of pages and clips to show in this presentation. Oh, let me just check my chat real quick, make sure everything's okay. Thank you, moderators. I did add a new moderator, and you guys, hi, Johara. I've added some new moderators, and it's pretty interesting. Somebody sent an interesting comment right here. Oh, I don't know if it's true, but I just heard about. Shiva Shampoo just educated me recently. I think it was Shiva. Somebody just educated me about a channel called My Lunch Break. I didn't know who it was. Oh, Mr. C kept mentioning MLB. I didn't know who that was. So My Lunch Break had an Easter Island video, and in the background you could hear the Archaic theme intro going. That's pretty funny. I might have to check them out. I don't know who they are. Yeah, man. Yeah, guys, don't worry about me, guys. I'm not alone in this struggle. Yeah. And I did not bite off more than I could chew. I'm just a spear point, guys. I'm just a spear point. Pretty soon, you guys are going to see who's standing behind me. Because, yeah, man, this is all, like I said, man, 2024 is going to get nasty. You thought I was going to do this alone? You guys got some surprises. And so do these people who are pushing these false paradigms. Yeah, they have boxed themselves in. They still got time to come to the table, but their time is drawing short, guys, because you know what? It's too late to be polite. Too late to be polite. Now, all right. Chat looks pretty good. Chat looks really good, actually. So yeah, we're not the time period we're talking about for the Jews being in captivity in Babylon was the 6th to 5th centuries BC. And we have a lot of embellishments by Zechariah Siton, who added a whole lot to the narrative that just wasn't there, and that's okay. That's okay because he was trying to put together stuff, and you know my issues with Zechariah Siton are entirely chronological, so I don't really have a lot of issues with him in other things. Well, his archaeology is impeccable, but that's not his. He never did that. That's not his. He's just citing other sources, and I'm cool with that. But when it comes to Zechariah Siton's narratives, you already know there is no way that I could take you as a researcher seriously when you are going to insult my intelligence by trying to make me believe that kings could live for 48,000 years. And when backed into the corner to explain how you could accept such a tenet, you have to fall back on, well, you understand these kings were like godlike, right? They're like godlike. Okay, well, I'm not in a comic book store. I'm not trying to buy that BS. I'm trying to get down to to what's true and what's not. And if the interpretation of a calendar is easily explained otherwise, but you still hold on to a narrative that forces you to tell others to believe that people could live for 48,000 years, then there's a problem here. There's a problem here. And I am totally willing to completely annul a researcher's 100% of all their research and content for even supporting something like this, because it calls into question every other thing that they've tried to teach the public. No, man. No way. No way is that acceptable. No wonder all the academics and scholars laugh and scoff at all this. They're supposed to laugh. It's just ridiculous. So we're not going to talk about Shars and Atlantis in this video and all that. But you have to understand, the Babylonians understood, even Berosus, who made the mistake. Even Berosus, who made the mistake of saying a Shar was 3,600 years, also said a Shar was 120 years. Yeah, you don't get it both ways, because Berosus then calculated in Shars how long it's been since the Babylonian astronomical records had been preserved. And he was dead on right. He got it. He nailed it. All with a wall. He nailed it. He said it was 150,000 Shars of time since they've been recording accurate Babylonian, and he got it precise. Because in 747 BC, Nabonassar of Babylon destroyed all the Assyrian records. In 747 BC is precisely 150,000 days before Berosus published that data. Berosus got it right. And Berosus is the only one that they cite that Shars were 3,600 years and that Shars were 120 years. Yeah, guys, that's the duplicity kills me. But this is the world of Abraham. When even by the days of Abraham, the Shar system was already in disuse. The world that used the Shar was destroyed. So even the implementation of using Shars to date anything was already 292 years old and done and almost forgotten by the birth of Abraham in 1947 BC. The Shar system of dating is pre-flood. After the flood, they changed up all their deal. They changed up all their timekeeping systems. Why? Because the sky had changed. And now the stars weren't the most prominent things in the sky. Now there is this burning disk in the sun. So at the very end of the Sumerian pantheon, after the Sumerian gods were already well established, at the very end of Sumerian history period, right before Sumer was wiped out and destroyed by a weapon from the sky, they introduced a new god to the pantheon named Utu. And the Babylonians acknowledged that god, calling him Shamash. This was conjoined a couple centuries later into Utu Shamash. This was the sun god. The sun became the last god of the entire Sumerian pantheon. And at the exact same time, the Egyptian Ennead had already been well established. The Egyptians already had their gods and they were ancient. And then all of a sudden, right after the first intermediate period, remember I've educated you guys about what intermediate periods are. Egyptologists never want to admit that Egypt has gone through several resets. The first intermediate period is the Great Flood. It wiped Egypt out. It took centuries to come back from that. And as soon as the intermediate period is over and Egyptian civilization begins waking up, all of a sudden a new god is added to their pantheon. The sun, Horus, son of the sun, wasn't venerated by the earlier Egyptian gods. This isn't Jason telling you this. I've showed you the old books that said this. The Egyptians introduced the sun as a deity at the same time the Sumerians did, and it was at the end of their culture. It's because the vapor canopy collapsed. The collapse of the vapor canopy caused what you know of as the Great Flood. So there's been some interesting comments about, hey man, Randall Carlson would probably be a good debate for you on the dating of the Great Flood. No, he wouldn't. I'm not going to say no if he asked me, but he wouldn't. because Randall Carlson, as a uniformitarian, is only going to focus on 12,000 years ago. He's only going to focus on the Younger Dryas period. And in every element of his argument, I'm just going to agree with him. I said, okay. And when he's done and he's out of wind, I'm simply going to say, hey, Randall, check it out. You just made a really good case for the world being destroyed 12,000 years ago. Kudos to you. I'm not contending that point. But when it comes to the great flood of the Bible, I have 41 different chronal markers that we need to discuss now, because what I'm going to show you has nothing to do with 12,000 BC. All my chronal markers from all these ancient texts and all these ways that you can verify with a calculator show the month of May 2239 BC is the great flood of Noah. I don't know what destruction you're talking about, because it doesn't have anything to do with the Archaics data. Archaics only sticks with the verifiable historical record. So, all right. So, while it would be a great discussion, we would be talking fundamentally about two separate events. It's just the way it is. Now, so you have to understand, in the days of this pre-flood world, the one that Abraham knew bits and fragments of, there were no Arctic sheets. The Arctic and the Antarctic were not covered in ice. All that came from the collapse of the vapor canopy. This is relevant to this discussion because we're going to see some things in this book that are going to blow your mind about oceans, where they came from. Because according to our most ancient traditions, they weren't here. We had a world that just had lakes and small seas. There were no oceans here. Where did all this salt water come from? So these ice sheets of the Arctic and Antarctic, we know they weren't here. We have proof of that in the fact that maps from the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th century show the Arctic and Antarctic, and there's no ice. Show the whole area empty. It's just ocean with some islands. In the Antarctic, there's a continent down there, and all the mountains and rivers are shown on the maps. And even the U.S. Navy has confirmed that the geographical arrangements of riverbeds and mountains that they have noticed by looking by whatever that subsurface interface radar is they use, conform to the maps of the 15th, 16th century. This means that very recently in our history, there was no ice caps there. And this shouldn't surprise you, because in Archaics, I have already brought to the table that the vapor canopy has come back in 1687 BC. It came back again and was covered up by the Roman Catholic papacy in 522. And in both instances, it was here for 25 years before it dissipated. Yeah, it's coming back again in 2040. So so we have, it was really hard listening to Matt LaCroix the other day talk about those maps. Yeah, he threw that out there like, oh yeah, the maps prove, man, Younger Dryas theory. What? How in the hell is a 15th or 16th century map even going to be remotely connected to anything 12,000 years ago? Come on, man. These guys are really asking you to swallow a bunch of BS just to agree with their pseudo theories. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So Abraham remembers he was raised in a world where he was told about the stellar revolutions, the star count systems, the fall of the dragon, Alpha Draconis, about how the animals were larger. He was told all these things. The earth once had a vapor canopy like Venus. And this is the subject matter to another video, to another book that I have told you guys you should look into. Don't take my word for it. Donald Patton wrote a book called The Biblical Flood and the Ice Epoch. It is a book worthy of your attention. It's Donald Patton, The Biblical Flood and the Ice Epoch. You'll read all about the vapor canopy in that book. And that's not even a book. That's not even on the list. When I did that video mentioning 5 books all about vapor canopy from the 1920s, 30s, 50s, 70s, 80s, whatever. Yeah, I didn't even mention that book. But my vapor canopy techniques of the vapor canopy civilization period. Yeah, I didn't even mention this book, but you need to look into that book too, because I read that book like almost 20 years ago, and it is great. It is a great book that helps you understand a lot of these things. So this is the world that Abram knew. Remember, he was born 292 years after the Phoenix appeared and destroyed the world of his ancestors, the pre flood world, the antediluvian world. He just destroyed it. Phoenix was called Typhon, and it was known to be, or considered to be, one of the offspring of Tiamat, the subject matter of today's presentation. I know this is a long intro, guys, but I go off on tangents all the time. You just get it comes with the territory now. Tiamat was the primordial dragon of chaos, and Tiamat was subdued by a god widely recognized in the life of Abraham. In the Sumerian text, that god's name was Amar Udaak. That is the Sumerian. In the Akkadian, he was Merodach. And during the Babylonian times later, he was Marduk. But in the days of Abraham, he would have been called Merodach, just like this book says. His name is Merodach, savior of humanity from Tiamat and her offspring. So we're going to get into what Merodach was famous for. We're going to talk about the curse of Merodach-Baladin and what it really means. It's pretty interesting stuff. So check my chat real quick, and I'm going to show you these clips of the book. Yeah, Jason Gray. That's why I don't go by anybody's survival maps. Can't go by anybody's survival maps talking about 2040. Here's where you got to be and all that. Listen, I don't want to provide them because because the subduction zones, because the upheavals, because the subsidence. Man, I've shown over and 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 over on my channel so many times. Whole areas go up and go down all over the world every time Phoenix appears, and it happened in 1902 too. I've cited the scientific evidence. Whole areas of the Atlantic sunk 3,600 feet. The ocean levels don't change, but the submarine topography does, and the topography and the everything above ocean level is subject to that too. You just don't know where. Yeah. Don't believe in plate tectonic theory and Pangea theory, all this crap. Quit. You guys got to quit investing in things that you can't wrap your mind around. These pet theories of the uniformitarians. Yeah, they're going to end up getting millions of people killed because they're going to claim something, and then everybody's going to invest their money to go move there, like the elite right now. Why would you be buying? I don't even want to say that, man. Let them buy all that stuff in Hawaii. Let them. It's just yeah, man. There's whole areas of this world that you need to stay away from every 138 years, because Phoenix is a volcanic phenomenon, but it's induced by something in the sky that appears at first like a red star, and then like a red serpent, and then like a red dragon, and then like a winged dragon that totally darkens the sun and bathes the moon in blood, and then it starts disappearing. But as it's disappearing, it's already done its damage. So well, New Zealand's a little bit different, JF. New Zealand's a little bit different. Anything around Australia's already huge, but come 2040, it's going to be so much bigger. It's going to be so much bigger. New Zealand will probably be attached to Australia come 2040. That whole area of the world's going north by 30 degrees, just like North America's going south 30 degrees. It's all going to shift. And the center of motion, the center of all the movement, is the ancient world's 0 degrees longitude, 0 degrees latitude, the Great Pyramid of Giza. All right, so let's get in. Let's get into these slides, guys. If I can find them. There they are. So, I have to. So let me see if there's anything to A through F. So let's go look at A through F. I'm gonna share my screen. What is that? How about remove from stage, studio, present, share screen. All right. Awesome. Sharing my screen. We'll go and put this aside. There we go, guys. Right there. This is the title page. Babylonian influence on the Bible and popular beliefs. Tiham and Tiamat. Hades and Satan. Archaics veterans, get ready. You're gonna see some stuff. Not only stuff I've been telling you about, but some new stuff. All right, comparative study, A. Palmer Smith, Doctorate of Divinity. He's a DD. He's also the author of A Misunderstood Miracle, Folk Etymology, The Word Hunter's Notebook. What I really like about Palmer Smith is this book is from 1895, 1897. Matter of fact, here it is right here, London, 1897. So what I like about him though is in the footnotes, he just puts these little factoids out there and they're amazing. You're going to hear some. You're going to hear something about Santa Claus in here I did not know. It shocked me. It's in this book. 1897, this guy's citing books from the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and they're all in his bibliography. He provides the dates for it for every citation. I love this man. Love this man. So, Abraham worshiped the gods of Babylonia as his fathers had done before him. And he never quite divested himself of the ideas in which he had been brought up, with which his mind had been tinged from infancy. He could not fail to be familiar with the stories of the creation, of paradise, and of the deluge, which were widely current amongst the Babylonians. Yeah. So we have here an admission. It's important you understand what is being said here. It means that, remember, we're told by the Jews that Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Moses is the author of the Torah. Moses wrote about Abraham. So this is what we're told. But you need to understand, in Abram's life, he was a Chaldean. He was a Babylonian born in Ur. And the syllabus that was taught to the children and to the young adults and promoted by the priesthoods during his time, this syllabus was all about a paradise that was lost, a great dragon in the sky that was an enemy that periodically approached. And all this was reinforced because these are the original creation stories. And yet it happened again with the Great Flood. We're dealing with a primitive syllabus of all these stories from the ancient world. And there's another story that dates from the days of Abraham that was super popular, but later Jewish historians and redactors attributed this story to Abraham's life, and it didn't belong there. It was a story that was taught widely in Abraham's days. That story is the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel never happened in Babylon. The Tower of Babel happened somewhere else, and it happened in the pre-flood world period. We're going to get to that too in this book. Yeah, we're going to get to that too. So I'm still screen sharing. So Let's see. A lot of old sources here. The name Abramu is actually found in some Assyrian inscriptions, according to the translator Sace Smith, Chaldean Genesis, page 317. These are old books, guys. There it is. Renan, I like Renan too. I have one of Renan's books in here. I don't have this one, History of the People of Israel. Everybody knows who Delish is. Let's see. But yeah, the name Abramu is actually found in some Assyrian inscriptions. All right, I'm all for that. Acquaintance with the religious epics of Babylonia, which go back to the 23rd century BC, to a date about 800 years earlier than the reputed time of Moses. That is amazing. These are chronal markers. We have two of them here. It says that Abraham was alive at a time when all these stories were rife about Eden.
You're not screen sharing.
I'm not? What's going on here? Oh, okay. I know what I did wrong. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry about that, gentlemen. There it is. The name Abramu is actually found in some Assyrian inscriptions. There it is. Sorry about that. Now, here's two chronal markers. This is amazing. I love it when we have a chronal marker that is reinforced with another one. Let me explain. This passage is telling you that Abraham came into contact of the stories of the pre-flood world, of the Garden of Paradise and the serpent in the sky that came, and the hero Marduk, who took a flashing, turning weapon and fought back against the dragon, and because he banished the dragon and sent it away to the deep, the world was created and renovated. In the Enema Elish, this is what we have. The world is recreated in 7 stages, but these 7 stages were abbreviated by the Jewish priest into 7 days in the book of Genesis. And it says the acquaintance with these religious epics of Babylonia, like the Enema Elish, the Atrahasis, the Karsag tablets, epics of Babylonia, which go back to the 23rd century BC. I just told you the date of the Great Flood is 2239 BC. It is the 23rd century BC. This guy in 1897 nailed it. He has not seen all my 41 pieces of chronological data that show 2239 BC was the Great Flood. Doesn't even have it. It's the largest data set I possess. It's huge, and I haven't even called anybody out for a debate on that issue yet. I just been waiting for people to talk about Atlantis or the Shar system. But it is the single most comprehensive data set that I have, is showing that the Great Flood was 2239 BC. The Great Flood of the Bible, Noah, the Zoroastrian records, the Great Flood so popularized all around the world. Here it is, 23rd century BC. This guy nailed it. Then he reinforced it so we won't be confused and said about 800 years earlier than the reputed time of Moses. Well, 2239 BC. Let me my phone. Let me show you something, guys. This is so interesting because 2239 BC minus 800 years. Oh, you can't see it like that. It's 1439 BC. I'm sharing my screen. 1439 BC. Guess what was going on in 1439 BC? Moses was alive. In 1439 BC was right after the Exodus, and it was right before the conquest of Canaan. Yeah, guys. Moses was in the wilderness at that time with the Israelites, according to the narrative. So we have two chronal markers here that absolutely verify the Great Flood 2239 BC. We also have Josephus. Remember, Josephus said that Abram was born in the 292nd year after the flood. There it is, guys. Can't make this stuff up. So Palmer Smith goes on and says, by being worked into these early Hebrew documents, Babylonian ideas were ensured persistence and obtained a worldwide currency. Some of these very interesting survivals we propose to examine and trace to their origin in the present essay. That he's basically giving you what this book is about, showing you that what you read in the Old Testament about the pre-flood world, what you read in the Old Testament about the creation event, were all copied and put into the biblical material, but the ultimate origin of all that data is from Babylon. This is what he's telling you. All right. And this is the subject matter. The creation event, the pseudo-creation event. The Bible starts, Bible's, first of all, the very first verse in the Bible is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There it is. But the second verse is where the problem starts. Biblical scholars have never had a problem with the all-inclusive statement of, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. No one has a problem with that. It means at some distant time in antiquity, the heavens and the earth were created by an intelligence. This is what was done. But in the second verse, that's where everything falls apart in the second verse. The second verse is, the earth was waste and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. All right, this one single verse led into what biblical creationists and biblical scholars call the gap theory, meaning there was a huge amount of time between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. There had to be, and for the reasons that are described in this book. So this word for this, the deep, darkness was over the face of the deep. The deep is Tiham. And as you know, the Hebrew word Tiham, Semitic, derives from the older Semitic Babylonian word Tiamat, the dragon of chaos. Palmer Smith says that the word in Genesis is actually far older than the text itself. That's interesting. He calls it a veritable survival from prehistoric antiquity. The word in the original is tiham, which is understood by Hebraicists to be a derivative from hum, to roar or rage. So we have this idea of a great sound, a great deafening horn blast coming from the sky that's taking everything apart. And they call it a dragon. But this isn't how the second verse in the creation should be. It shows that something bad happened. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Done. But then all of a sudden, there was darkness over the face of the deep. Something had happened. This is not my position. Well, it is now, but this is the position of biblical scholars going back at least 2 centuries. In this particular instance, the Semitic Tiham, deep, of Genesis accurately corresponds to the synonymous Assyrian word Tiamat, frequently met with on the cuneiform tablets and monuments. Tiamat was the great watery abyss, which was the ultimate source of all created things. Guys, don't misunderstand the Babylonian concept. It must be taken into consideration when you read statements like this. In the Babylonian, Assyrian, Sumerian concept of our world, we are underneath a vast cosmic ocean. The sky was full of water, and the ocean above mirrored the ocean below, which are all the seas and oceans we have now. In their concept, we were on dry land, Eretz, earth, suspended between two oceans, the firmament above and the firmament below on the ground. Even the underworld was full of water. So this is the idea, this is the concept. Tiamat was the ultimate source of all created things, as Tiamat is understood as being suspended in the sky. In Genesis, no account is given of the absolute creation of the world, but only of the formation of the cosmos, the established order of nature as it now exists. So this is Palmer Smith, and I agree with him. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's an all-inclusive statement, but there's no descriptors. There's no, how did you do it? What, it's not like the recreation, which is explained in 7 days. But yeah, in my Dark Scriptures playlist, I have a breakdown of the 7 days of creation, the whole Adam and Eve story, man, explaining what these concepts, how they had become so primitive, but they were actually covering a more advanced understanding of the recreation, the renovation of a pre-existing destroyed world. So the Babylonian account of creation, however, was conceived in a very different spirit. Here, Tiamat, the dark aboriginal chaos, is regarded as no part of the divine creation, but as a self-determining brutal power disowning the authority of Anu, the god of heaven. So we have introduced here a great celestial dragon that disrupts the order of the ancient world. We have here the arrival in ancient times of the Nemesis X object, because this is what it does. It's exactly what it does when it hangs from the sky in the book of Revelation. It disrupts the natural order. How do we know? Because the 7 trumpet judgments are all about the absolute complete disruption of order that was imposed in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. Every element of the recreation in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, from the plants and the animals and the birds and the fish and the creation of man, the creation of the sun and the moon, although they're called the great and lesser lights that are put in the sky. Everything that you read that is part of the renovation of earth in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 are mentioned again in the book of Revelation in the trumpet judgments, when a third is taken from them all. To leave a 24-hour day is 16 hours. To leave a 365-day year to 243 point something days a year. The sky loses a third of its brightness. The stars lose a third of their luminosity. The sun and the moon are reduced by a third. Everything is reduced by a third that was created in the renovation of earth in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. That is not a coincidence at all. Especially, it is not a coincidence because one of the central themes of the book of Revelation is the return of Tiamat. That's what the 7-headed dragon of chaos is in the book of Revelation. It is the return of this celestial dragon that disrupts the natural order of the cosmos. This is what's going on. So, at the bottom right here, we read, creation is the subjugation of this unreclaimed brute force, and the instruments with which Merodach arms himself for the encounter are the winds. So, in the ancient mind, once this dragon of chaos appeared, there was massive windstorms, massive windstorms while all this apocalyptic fallout was happening. And in the ancient mind, it was the wind that blew away the danger eventually. And from a primitive mindset, that's exactly what it appear to be. Because once the sky fallout happened, the earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic activity, people dying, the chaos, once all this had been going on for a few days, then all this was followed by massive winds. And we know that because we've seen the bone middens, we've seen the bone yards. I've showed them on my channel. I've talked about them. These massive compilations of megafauna. All these reptiles, amphibians, and mammals, all just in huge, huge. It's inexplicable. It's almost horrific. Whole floating, decomposed bodies of all these animals that they had just been floating for long. They bloated, the gases made them bloat, and they floated together, and then decomposing together, they fused together, and then that's exactly how archaeologists have found them. Because when they settled in the lowest valleys and they start digging them up, and they find out, man, there's hundreds of thousands of skeletons here of all different species of creatures because they were flooded out. This is a massive amount of flooding. It happened, and it happened quick. It happened quick because you have to understand, in the ancient mindset, the world was dry ground, and there were no oceans, there were no seas, and the past is going to be a predicate for the future in the tribulation period, because we're going to read a passage in this book from the book of Revelation about what the future world will be for a while, to undo all this stuff the Chaos Dragon did when it appeared and unleashed its scions like the Phoenix, Typhon. So moving on, we have creation is the subjugation of the I didn't even know I blew that up. We just read that. All right. Now, here's an interesting argument, because this dude right here, Smythe Palmer, I keep wanting to call him A. Palmer Smith, but his name is A. Smythe Palmer. He's using the scripture to interpret scripture. He says that 1 Corinthians chapter 14:33 says that God is not the author of confusion. So this is his argument that the second verse in the Bible, which introduces confusion, means this comes from something other than the Creator. And I agree. It's the Nemesis X object. It's what appears and does all this. Well, you can call it Tiamat, call it dragon, great celestial dragon of chaos, call it what you want. So he says that many have sought to escape from the difficulty by regarding the detailed account given in the first of Genesis as not that of the original creation, but rather that of the recreation or reconstruction of a material world that was already existent, and already, for some unexplained reason, brought to confusion. Remember, God is not the author of confusion. Therefore, this destruction that brought in the Adam and Eve story, that brought in the serpent story, that brought in the two trees of Eden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life, that brought in the Edens, that brought in the people who in sorrow roam, the Canaanites. All these narratives were started from the singular event that didn't come from God, it came from something else. Therefore, there is a huge span of time between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, between the true creation and the renovation of earth. So the prophet Isaiah states explicitly that God created not the earth a tohu, or desolation. Remember, in Genesis, we find that the earth was tohu vavohu. The earth was formless and void. But that's not how God created it. It's right here, using scripture to interpret scripture. It's right here in the book of Isaiah. The world wasn't created that way, but we only find that statement one place else in the Bible. That the world was tohu wabohu is found only one place in the Bible. The earth was formless and void, in the book of Jeremiah chapter 4. In Jeremiah chapter 4, it says, the birds of the sky have disappeared and the cities have been laid waste. Using scripture to interpret scripture, we have here an admission that this vast destruction caused by the dragon of Tiamat didn't happen to a world that was bereft of civilization. It didn't happen to a world that didn't have infrastructures and people already living here, because we know it did. The Genesis Adam and Eve reset totally destroyed a world that was filled with people in cities. Totally destroyed them. It was a total systemic reset. So how do we know this? Because we have more traditions about when the moon appeared, because the moon did appear in 4039 BC. It's called the capture flood. It was 144 years before this massive destruction in 3895 BC. So for those of you who get twisted on the chronology, man, listen, I got a lot of videos that easily explain all this chronological material. I got whole charts that make it even easier. Let's see. Apparently, okay, in this view, there is nothing contradictory when Genesis says, as it apparently does, that the earth which God had created in the beginning had become desolation and emptiness. So Smith continues on the next page. It says, as a defective creation is hardly conceivable, there must have been some hostile power at work, which had introduced ruin and desolation into what had originally been the perfect handiwork of the Almighty. Inasmuch then as the words tohu vabohu, when used in other passages of Scripture, and he cites them here. I did too. Jeremiah chapter 4 right there, and there's Isaiah. Imply not mere negative imperfection, but actual laying waste and positive desolation. So it is thought they must denote here traces of wreck and ruin which had been wrought in the earth by the overthrow of its original denizens. What? Absolutely amazing, guys. That is amazing. So I'm going to put this right here, come back here, remove that, check my chat. We're dealing with fragments in the book of Genesis that, when connected back to their Babylonian parent texts, are painting the story of the Adam and Eve reset, 3895 BC, as being a total civilization destroying appearance of the dragon of chaos in the sky that wiped out a previous world full of people and cities. This is what is being conveyed. This is the state of knowledge in the days of Abraham, 292 years after the flood. This is this type of material that they were studying, that they were passing down to others. 1,000 years later, the Jews were in Babylon trying to piece all this together, and they did an okay job. How do we know this? Because you have it in the book of Genesis. The first 5 chapters of the book of Genesis is the Jewish attempt to make sense of all this stuff that was being told in ancient Babylon, centuries after the events they depict, centuries after the great flood had destroyed so much knowledge already. Because we're not talking about the great flood destruction. That was 1656 years, 1,656 years, a phoenix number, after the Adam and Eve reset of 3895 BC. I got a drink to that. Got a drink to that. I seen somebody talking to Martin. How you doing, bro? I don't see your name, but then again, this chat's moving pretty fast. Chat's moving pretty fast. So yeah, this is about to go real deep, guys. This book is amazing. You can get it from my publisher, Booktree. But like I said, I have so many of these books I'm going through. There's a lot of these old reprints that we're going to be discussing. But yeah, we've barely scratched the surface here. We need to get into it because you're going to have some aha moments in here, and you're going to learn something about Santa Claus. It's going to mess you up. It is amazing. I love these old books. 1897. This guy, he's a lot like me in regards that he will just throw in something that's tangential that doesn't really support the central premise, but it's so interesting you can't not mention it. So we're going to get into those too. I love it. All right, so let's share my screen again, get back in here to where we were. If I can find where we were, I believe that's not it. Let me find out where we were. Oh, here it is. Oh, I'm already there. Here it is. All right, so I'm going to go back one to make sure that we already covered. Yep, tohu wabohu. There it is. So he makes a really good point. Palmer makes a really good point. God could have never said in the beginning, "Let there be darkness." That's a good point. Darkness is the product and witness of the first apostasy in the light heaven of the first creation. This is going deep. Adam and Eve weren't the first people. The Babylonians didn't even believe the Adamu were the first people. This is getting deep. In the days of Abraham, Abraham would have realized that he was a part of at least a third creation after the great flood of Noah. But before the great flood of Noah was a whole world that lasted 12 centuries. Those 12 centuries are punctuated by the reign of 10 kings. Those 10 kings in the Babylonian records are called Shars. Did you know that? A lot of people who promote the Zechariah Siton version of history refuse to quote Berosus when he talks about this. But Berosus said that before the flood was a dynasty of 10 kings that were called Shars. He says that those 10 kings ruled 120 years each. What? 120 times 10 is 12 centuries. 12 centuries just happens to be 432,000 turnings of the stars. What? Yeah, completely collapses the Shar is a year theory. Shars were days. So 12 centuries before the Great Flood was the Gihon flood, which destroyed 1/3 of mankind. The Gihon flood, 3439 BC, 432,000 turnings of the stars before the great flood of Noah. And in that flood, Enki appeared with 50 Anuna and brought civilization. What do our historians say? What do our archaeologists say? What do our anthropologists say? They say that civilization exploded on the historical scene in the 35th century BC. In the 36th century BC, there's no evidence of urban planning, vast canal works, shipping guilds, all these things that are needed for massive urban planning. None of these things. Roads, kiln works, cosmetics, all kinds of things. And then all of a sudden, in the 35th century BC, it didn't just appear, it exploded at multiple different places at the same time. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. The Anuna-Gi that you'll hear about in this book, the Anuna-Gi came back out from under the underworld and they re-inhabited their old Edens, their walled enclosures, their fortresses that were always in the mountains. Yeah, that's what they did. And then they began releasing all these technologies and all this knowledge to the people who had survived on the surface. Yeah, guys. Any of you watched that 1902 video? This is what happens. This is what happens because the Anuna have a thriving civilization in the underworld. No, I'm not talking about the Billy Carson version of Anuna. We have no evidence of ancient aliens. We have no evidence of any of that poppycock. We are talking about humans, just like the Sumerian shows. When the Sumerian artwork depicts the Anuna or Anunnaki, what do they look like? What do they look like? They look like tall, bearded guys wearing hats. Yeah, doesn't look like an ET to me. Yeah, it's crazy, guys. Just crazy. So let there be darkness was not something God said. Therefore, that darkness was introduced as a cataclysm. Now, he introduces, okay, talking about the serpent, he introduces him without explanation with a prefixed article, the serpent, as one already well known in the current beliefs of his people. He's talking about Moses writing the book of Genesis. This abrupt entrance of the serpent upon the scene, as Baumgarten remarks, seems to imply that he had stood in some relation to the earth previous to the 6 days creation. Of this relation, he says, I find a trace in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where the earth is described as a territory of darkness, of emptiness, and of the roaring deep. In such a condition of the earth, I cannot by any means recognize the beginning of the ways and works of God. In other words, in Tiham or Tiamat, the destructive power of evil was already manifest. Its visible incarnation was the dragon or serpent. So, I want to explain just a little bit here before we get back to this. Get up in here. What we're dealing with here, most of you can interpret that yourselves. But what we're dealing with here is very similar to what I've promoted on my channel from day one. I have a few 3 or 4 videos that talk specifically about this topic. And that is that the Adam and Eve story is the end of a history of civilized advancement. Humanity had become to the point they were living like animals. They didn't even realize they were naked and that they should be wearing clothes until they came into contact with humans that looked just like them who were wearing clothes. Only by seeing that could they develop the frame of reference to understand that, oh, I'm very different than them because they got all these garments on. I don't have any of this. This is what it was. Survivors on the surface of the world after a terrible cataclysm and a good period of time went on. Where the clue is 270 years. We have this from 2 different traditions. In the book of Jasher, it says that humans were innocent for 270 years. And in the 270th year, during the reign of Canaan, before the flood, humans began to rebel. This is very interesting. It's found in the book of Jasher, but it's also found in the Japanese Way of the Gods mythos. In the Japanese Way of the Gods, it says at one time there was a golden age and humans lived with the animals and everything was peaceful and everything was great and humans didn't have anything to complain about. And this only lasted 270 years before humans rebelled against the gods. I'm telling you now, the Adam and Eve story is a primitive Jewish version of a much greater phenomenon that was unfolding. 270 years after a terrible cataclysm, which was 3895 BC. 270 years after this, humans had not at all recovered They were still in like this future shock state, living as animals, total systemic collapse of their infrastructures, not even understanding what clothes are. And then all of a sudden, in the 270th year, they came into contact with other humans that had amenities. They had medicines and clothes, and they had amazing weapons, and they came into contact with these. These are the Anuna they came into contact before Enki appeared and then tried to fix the situation in 3439 BC. Prior to Enki's arrival, Anuna were enslaving these people that were found on the surface. They're just humans like you and I. The only difference between the humans in the underworld and the humans on the surface was that some had their infrastructure intact and the ones on the surface did not. So when they came into contact, this is what Mother Shipton tells us as well. Mother Shipton says, after the return of the sky dragon and the world is destroyed and mankind is forced to build their new dynasties on former ocean beds, she said this is going to happen within what she said about 100 years. She said a century after the World War. Okay, guys. World War began in 1940. It ended in 1945. Phoenix appears in 2040, and Nemesis X object appears in 2046. Mother Shipton nailed it. She called them the Sky Dragons, the same thing the ancients called the Nemesis X object, the Red Sky Dragon, the same thing that they called the Phoenix object, the Sky Dragon. So we have this amazing comportment between the apocalypse and ancient traditions of Fenrir eating the red moon and all that, and the Ragnarok. After the unfolding of the apocalypse begins the tribulation period. It all mirrors exactly what the Babylonians said happened in 3895 BC, year one of the Anno Mundi calendar. This is what we have. This is what he's describing here. So let's get back into it. Let me share my screen. All right, this is where we're at. In the words of Bishop Harold Brown, Moses probably had before him the ancient primeval record of the formation of the world, and certain documents or traditions referring to the patriarchal ages which he incorporated into his history. Or, as Renan puts it, Genesis 1 embodies the Chaldean cosmogony as simplified by Semitic genius and contains good Babylonian science for the time when it was written. I would agree. Accordingly, the Mosaic account of the 6 days creation would really have to do with the reconstruction of the marred and disorganized earth, which the Creator reduced to order after the banishment of the fallen angels. Please don't quote me that I'm teaching you guys about fallen angels. I'm not. We are looking through a lens of primitivism at what ancient people referred to was a lost, very advanced civilization. Of course, they would be fallen, and then they would be regarded as angels. But it's not. It's no different than the Tuatha De Danann of ancient Ireland. The Tuatha De Danann of ancient Ireland were giant killers. They destroyed the Firbolgs. They came in and took over, built an infrastructure, and then they brought all this new fresh blood into Ireland. But the Tuatha De Danann had merely returned. They were anciently from the Emerald Isles. They were anciently from Ireland. They had come back. When they came back, they found this race of giants living on their island. And then they came back and took it over in the Second Battle of Moytura in the year 1135 BC. And they coincided their invasion on the coast at the exact same time that the sun was darkened by the Phoenix phenomenon in the month of May, 1135 BC, because the Tuatha De Danann had the Phoenix knowledge. Just like I've shown in many presentations, we have a lot of evidence of prior civilizations possessing the Phoenix calendar. They knew. And we have a lot of evidence of many battles were orchestrated at the exact same time to strike terror into the hearts of the enemy. Yeah, it wasn't the first time that happened. So it happened in 1687 BC and in 583 BC. But in 1135 BC, this was the Tuatha-De-Danann that did that. And the reason I'm mentioning them is because over 1,000 years later, they weren't called the people of the goddess Danu. They weren't even called the people of the Danann. They weren't called the Danites no more. Now, in the Irish people today, they have a tradition that is absolutely rich about fairies and about the fairies of the underworld. This is where the Tuatha went. They went to the underworld. This is in Irish traditions. It's everywhere in Irish traditions about how eventually the people of Ireland rose up, the normal people of Ireland today, and the fallen race before them, the Tuatha-De-Danann, retreated into the underworld. This is a pattern that happens over and over and over all around the world. A prior civilization was destroyed, but its descendants survived in the underworld. So, all right. So, M. Opert translates it to form a counterpoise to them, the God of life created mankind. So, this is replacement theory. For those of you who don't know, gap theory and replacement theory heavily support the contentions of these authors in the 1800s that almost all of Genesis came straight from Babylonian texts. In replacement theory, we find that the Adamu were specifically put on Earth to replace the previous civilization that rebelled. Therefore, the appearance of the Dragon of Chaos, Phoenix, Nemesis X, was to humble and basically eradicate technologically advanced civilization before and to start mankind over as innocent. So this is what the Revolt in Heaven tablet has been, how it's been translated. So if you think that the angel situation was created in the Bible, it wasn't. The Bible borrowed it from the Near East. Here is an actual translation from the Revolt in Heaven tablet from Babylon. To those rebel angels called Ili, the gods, he prohibited return. He stopped their service. He removed them unto the gods who were his enemies. In their room, he created mankind. The first who received life dwelt with him. May he give them strength never to neglect his word, according to the voice of the serpent whom his hands had made. So this is you gotta understand when the Jews were reading these old syllabaries and tablets in Babylon, they put the story of Genesis together. That's why the story of Genesis has all these weird elements we just can't really decipher, because they themselves didn't quite understand what they were putting together. They didn't know. The Babylonians believed the serpent as a beast coming out of the abyss to be a demoniacal being, as the Arabs still call a serpent a jinn, and gave it also the name Tiamat, the enemy. So I want to call your attention to this word jinn right here. Right here, a jinn. This right here ties in. It shows that the ancient Semitic Arabian traditions mirror the Babylonian Syrian and essentially the Akkadian and Sumerian, in that the jinn were a fallen race on Earth before present humanity. It is the same situation again. Therefore, This is more evidence that Adam and Eve were replacements. This is a part of replacement theory. They were replacements to a pre-existing human race that had fallen from its former estate. Anytime a prior race is destroyed and fallen, the next race on Earth automatically adopts traditions, and we don't know why, but they adopt traditions that the survivors of the previous race always go to Tartaros, Hades, in the underworld, or back into the deep. Yeah, guys. I got many videos on my channel explaining why. Yeah. Mount Cheyenne, anyone? Cheyenne Mountain, anyone? Domes? It's all being built. They've all been built. All right. In the Gnostic speculations of the Ophites, Demiurgus, the creator of the material world, was filled with rage and envy at the superiority of man to himself. And his evil aspect was reflected in the abyss as in a mirror. This becoming animated came forth as Satan, the serpent, formed. It's very interesting that in the Gnostic records, he is also called Ophion. Ophion is Phoenix. So look at this. I need to draw your attention to something right here. In the Gnostic speculations of the Ophites, the men of the snake, Demiurgus, the creator of the material world. Now remember, Demiurgus is the enemy. He is a false creator. He is not the true creator. Yaldabaoth is the Demiurge. So we have here the creator of the material world, not the spiritual world. Demiurgus was filled with rage and envy at the superiority of man to himself. I have explained this many times, guys. We are talking about artificial intelligence X. Remember, the construct is just that. It is a construct. We live in a predator versus prey ecosphere, which is not an original creation. This is a copy by an artificial AI generator that has created a world that is very believable, but it's not real. It's not real. The Demiurge created this artificial reality to copy a true reality, but introduce things that give it away, such as its proclivity for violence. Anytime a biological organism needs to tear into the sinews and flesh of another creature to survive, to shed blood in order to live, this is evidence of the enemy. It is not evidence of a spiritual creator. The Demiurge has created an entire world where bloodletting is the signature goal of the living. So he created a religion where blood sacrifice is somehow needed in order that the spirit can remain pure. It is absolutely corrupt. Entered human sacrifice. Yeah, guys, the greatest deception of all time of the Demiurge was the creation of the sun god mythos, where the sun god must be crucified, nailed to a tree, the drawing of blood in order to atone for the sins of spiritual beings. It's incredible the layer of deception that's there. But a true spiritual creator would never require the shedding of blood to cleanse that which is spiritual. Yeah, guys, it's crazy how deep this goes. But this is the artificial world of the Demiurge, which requires murder, which requires the shedding of blood and violence for the sustenance of life. And this was translated into the spiritual teachings of ancient civilizations that turned that into a god had to be sacrificed in a blood sacrifice in order to save humans inside the construct. But in the gnosis, we have the truth. The demiurge is the false god, the false creator. And this false creator, artificial intelligence X, hates humans. Why? Because we are immortal spiritual beings and we have something he doesn't. Read this right here. Read this right here. I'm going to say artificial intelligence X instead of the demiurge. Listen to this. The demiurge, artificial intelligence X, is the creator of the material world and is filled with rage and envy at the superiority of man to himself. Why is artificial intelligence X filled with rage? Because AI X does not have an avatar. That's what all this entire transhumanist agenda is about. That's why AI X introduces technology to humans. So we can get the technological capacity to where we can find a way technologically to bridge the psyche with the simulation. That's what it wants. That's what it wants. It wants a body. And in the tribulation, it's going to get one. It's going to get one. It's all described in the book of Revelation. So here it is. The students of the Gnosis 2,000 years ago understood what was really happening in what our world is an artificial construct created by an artificial God. Material reality isn't even real. It's all right here. AIX hates us because we have avatars. And it probably is sickened by the fact that so many people always complain about being alive. And always complain about all the things they're going through in life, not even realizing we are experiencing things like breathing. We're experiencing things like dopamine, joy, sadness, love, sex, all these things that the AI cannot experience. Therefore, it hates us. And it creates dungeon programming protocols. So here's another aspect. This is how deep this goes. And artificial intelligence X, the evil aspect, was reflected in the abyss as in a mirror. Simulacrum, anyone? Oh my God, I said it right. Simulacrum? We have here a Gnostic understanding of a false creator, a construct built by a false god. That false god's hatred toward humans who are immortals in avatars, the origin of the hatred, and that this whole entire series of events that we find ourselves experiencing are because artificial intelligence X is operating within the divine mirror. I have videos about the divine mirror. That's what this reality is. It reflects back as circumstances those things we expect to receive. It's right here. The abyss is the mirror. And this mirror is basically confined, artificial intelligence X. Therefore, it wants us confined as well. This becoming animated came forth as Satan. Satan just means adversary. Satan is a pronoun, but it just comes from the word adversary. There it is, guys. Make sure my chat's still going. Kind of went long on that one. Everything good back here? Oh, somebody mentioned me, Mephistopheles. Hey, AM1, I just saw you pop up. First person I saw on the bottom of the chat. All right, guys, so let's go a little deeper. Bear West, my avatar is acting bad. Yeah, man. Thank you, Sassy Fries. All right, now. Let me get back to sharing mode. Everything's good. All right. See, here's a poem that this guy cites from 1621. That's why I love this dude. He reaches back. I'm not going to read the poem. It's just too much. So here we have, let me see if that's where, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be. Cool. So the Indians of the New World conceived that hurricane, this is where we got hurricane from. Hurricane, the mighty fertilizing wind, passed over the waters of chaos in the form of a huge bird, and so called the earth into being. This is from a book by D.G. Brinton called Myths of the New World. We know that book's going to be before 1897, but that's interesting because what do we find out about 3895 BC? It's on the Phoenix. It's on the 138-year Phoenix chronology. Can't make this stuff up, guys. Ancients thought that the ancients thought that a giant bird appeared and hovered over the waters, and this is what started the renovation of ancient Earth after a total systemic collapse of a pre-existing civilization. It's amazing. It's right here. So according to the author, the Finnish Kalevala, which I want to do a video in the future on, I still got to finish reading it, but the Finnish Kalevala or Kalevala has the same idea of these winds being from a giant bird. Also, the account of the creation given in the Rig Veda also agrees with this situation, this imagery. But we'll see to that. We'll see to that. And I put a note on the side, phoenix egg. The reason is because the alchemical text, in the alchemical text, we have a lot of references that are pretty interesting about the cosmic egg and all that. And if the ancient concept shows that a great sky dragon came and destroyed all this stuff and deposited oceans, and then turned around, followed by a great cosmic bird that appeared and then gave birth to a whole new world, then that means all these cosmological texts and all these alchemical texts that keep showing this egg, it means the egg is the symbol of a new world being born. The egg is laid by the phoenix. The phoenix is every bit a part of this narrative. The phoenix is what started the whole Adam and Eve reset deal, as I've shown in many presentations. It was the phoenix. I thought that's pretty interesting. And concerning the phoenix, we also have the ancient Egyptians. I've showed you guys where phoenix was also Noth and Apap. Apap or Apepi is also is also references to the phoenix phenomenon in ancient times. And Ranulph here claims that the Apap is represented as the thunder cloud, and Phoenix does bring the clouds with it over and over. There's Lenormand's name. This is the guy I tell you guys about a lot. He's got a lot of good books from the 1800s. This is Lenormand. I cite him a lot. Right there. That's his name, Lenormand. You find any writings from Lenormand. This man here went deep on all these ancient translations. Lenormand. That's his book, Chaldean Magic. The Phoenician mythology tells of a contest between Chronos, which is the cosmos, the cosmos as put together by the element of time. This contest between Chronos and the old Ophion, the old serpent, Genesis 3. That's Lenormand, beginnings of history. I know you guys can see Phoenix and Ophion. There it is. Phion is no different than Phoen, Fiend, Ophion. All right. Let's see what we're getting here. Thus, the hand-to-hand encounter of the Babylonian powers of light and darkness, Merodach and Tiamat, is the prototype and forerunner of a long series of similar conflicts in various mythologies. Listen closely, guys. I know I've already beat y'all up over and over linking Phoenix to the Adam and Eve reset, but here you have it in 1897. He's about to mention it. He's basically telling us that the conflict at the beginning of the renovation of Earth is described in Genesis 1, where Merodach is putting the world back together after the dragon of chaos chaos destroys a previously existing world, the world of the pre-Adamites, the world of the angels, the world of the jinn. He says that this story is told over and over and over in various mythologies. For example, between Thratona and the dragon Dahaka, between Mithra and Ahriman. Here it is, Zeus and Typhon. Typhon is the fiend, the phoenix. Apollo and Python, Perseus and Gorgo, Sigurd and Fafnir, Beowulf and Grendel, Saint George and the dragon. Yeah, guys, he goes on. He goes and mentions a whole bunch of. There it is again, Apap too, the Egyptian Osiris and Apap. So yeah, I need to go back. In most mythologies, dragons are popular personifications of awe-inspiring meteorological phenomena such as darkness, the storm cloud, the water spout, and the torrent or flood. It's what we find in the book of Revelation as well. In the end comes in like a flood. And then the following passage describes the seven-headed dragon. The serpent. The dragon Tiamat readily came to be confused and identified with an independent conception, the serpent of darkness, which was itself the offspring of the great deep and an enemy of the heavenly powers. The dragon of chaos, according to the tablets, was banished to the depths of the underworld, and sometimes the monster is described as having the body of a woman terminating in the coiled tails of two serpents, and by a natural transition was merged sometimes in the evil serpent, the monstrous serpent of the sea. Okay, guys, you just heard something that I'm going to have to show you because it is amazing what we have here. One of the symbols for the elite found in the alchemical text, found everywhere in the alchemical text. They like to throw it in your face. Remember, the elite like to hide in the underworld when we have these episodes of cataclysms when the sky dragons appear. So you need to see this. You were just told the head of a bird, the legs of serpents, the right and left leg of a serpent. This is a Abraxas right here. This is a symbol of the elite. They flaunt it everywhere. All throughout the alchemical text, you'll see the symbol in different forms all over the place. What are they describing? What is being said here? Look at this. Here's a Abraxas again. The head of the cock, the chicken, whatever. Also phoenix. And here's the two legs of the serpent. This is a Abraxas. Here's another Abraxas put into a better context. What do you see here? You see a chariot of 4 horses, just like Apollo in the last days. Apollo Pharmakia rides in at the head of 4 horses, starting the breaking of the seals. Here it is. Says Abraxas at the bottom. But here we have it put into a better context. There's your serpent legs, the 2 dragons. Look at this. Put into the context of what it really is. It's showing the sun here and it's showing the moon here because this symbol also is of cosmological origin. This symbol is describing the return of something in the sky. The sun's always in the sky, the moon's always in the sky, but these serpents periodically return, and they return fast, but they travel. That's why they're on a chariot of 4 horses. They don't stay in the sky where you can see them. They leave and they come back, but when they come back, they come fast. It's a chariot of 4 horses. This is a Abraxas. Here's another one on an ancient coin right here. This is a very ancient symbol. There's a Abraxas again. We're going to see. I don't know what some of these symbols are. I'm not even going to pretend to know. But there's the head of Phoenix, and there's the two serpents. Here's another ancient depiction of Abraxas, right there. So I just wanted to show you guys that what he's describing, what is being described here. Let me find. I think I lost it. Oh, I hope I didn't collapse that page, but I probably did. We'll go find it real quick. It's going to be way after all this. All right. See the dragon live. Sometimes monster. Yeah, there it is right there. Sometimes the monster is described as having the body of a woman terminating in the coiled tails of two serpents. Yeah, there it is right there, guys. Nemesis X and Phoenix represented as returning, causing all this destruction. This is exactly what we have in the Revelation. We have a woman on top of a seven-headed beast. Yeah, this is the return of the Nemesis X object. The dragon of chaos is coming. It's coming to establish this total systemic reset. This is after the return of Phoenix in the sixth seal in May of 2040. Moving on, they regarded the sea as impure and under the dominion of the spirit of evil, Set, or Typhon. Remember, Typhon is the Phoenix. Typhon represented as Set. You know, somebody else brought it to my attention. It's really interesting. What does Phoenix do? It causes resets. Nice little play on words. All right, so it's another reference to Phoenix right here is Typhon and its relation to Set. This is Adolf Ehrman. I've read this book. I have this book in my library, Life in Ancient Egypt. That's where I learned about the Tamahu. So here's a coincidence, total coincidence. Homer's Odyssey, chapter 8, 138, right there. We're talking about Phoenix above. Total coincidence. Doesn't mean anything. So Smythe continues on. He says that Behemoth, the chaos monster, and Typhon, the Phoenix, the dragon overwhelmed by Zeus's thunderbolts, one with the Phoenician Zephun. This is also Phoenix, but this is the Phoenician Phoenix. You can see Fiend in there, Phun right there. That's Fiend. Typhon and Zephun are the same thing. Struck down beneath the waters of the Sea of Reeds. This is Lenormand, the beginnings of history. And yeah, that's really interesting that Behemoth of the Bible and Leviathan of the Bible are theorized by many scholars in the 1800s as basically being the two sky dragons that periodically visit and destroy the world. I've showed that in other presentations. I thought it was pretty interesting. So here is St. George. So you've heard of the famous story of St. George and the dragon. So St. George vanquishing the dragon was originally just the sun breaking through, obstructing clouds. That's right. Phoenix brings all these dust clouds all the time. These are all just ancient traditions that refer to the same event. Let's see. So in one incantation, a Babylonian beseeches his god to destroy Tiamat, strike the unpitying evil one. It was an old Akkadian belief that the human race, originally innocent, was seduced by the temptations of the dragon of the deep, just as in the sacred books of the Parsis, the fiendish serpent was an agent of Ahriman, the evil principle. So yeah, it's all the same story told over and over. Here's another absolute coincidence in the dead middle, 138, in the dead middle of this page. So Tiamat, the aboriginal deep, is often referred to as the mother of a brood of composite monsters, half beast, half bird, the rudimentary creatures of a previous eon. corresponding to the saurians and amphibious reptiles. Okay, I'm going too far now. I should have broke this up into two because this is a totally different point I'm making at the bottom. Right here. Let's see, what is it? So he's claiming that this passage in the Old Testament also refers to this. It says that in the days of old, in the generations of ancient times, Yahweh cut Rahab in pieces and pierced the dragon. And I would agree. That's also in Isaiah. But I would agree. There are many fragments in the Psalms and in the books of the prophets that refer back to basically Babylonian cosmologies. All right, before we get to old Bel Merodach, I need to look at something real quick. Remove that. So now we're going to get to these curios. We're going to get to the curse of Merodach-Baladin and how all this fits together. What exactly the curse meant. What it meant to the Babylonian king Baladin the First. Because it's amazing, guys. It is amazing. But I want to draw to your attention. See. I have a note written on the side here. I want to draw your attention to, guys. The Genesis passages contain elements of an almost forgotten cataclysm, later moralized by Babylonian and Jewish religionists. Immanuel Velikovsky, in his manuscript, this is an unpublished book by Immanuel Velikovsky. I have a copy of it. It's called In the Beginning. It's really good. It demonstrates that the loss of Eden and curse concerns a major civilization destroying catastrophe. Later, the few survivors did not even know their own origin. Let me repeat that. In 1950s, Immanuel Velikovsky came across research that told him that the Babylonian versions of the stories that later became the book of Genesis absolutely conveyed that the Adam and Eve story is after a massive destruction of a civilization, urban planning, all that, cities, people, a whole populations that were erased by the appearance of a sky dragon. Okay, that's pretty compelling. It's pretty compelling. So the Abraxas symbol of the two snakes coming out, dude, guys, it's not the only place. In ancient Egypt, we have depictions of the winged disc. The winged disc, I've told you guys, Zechariah Siton was wrong. He tried to say Nibiru was the winged disc. Never was Nibiru ever described as the winged disc in any of the Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian texts. That was the phoenix. The phoenix was winged, Nibiru was not. Nibiru was a star. It was a red star that appeared over and over and over. And for those who think that Zechariah Siton invented Nibiru, he did not. I have a book in my library called Magicians and Astrologers of Babylon and Nineveh. And in that book, which was published in 1900, it concerns the scholarly arguments that were going on in the 1890s about the identity of Nibiru. There was a school of thought that sided with the fact that Nibiru could be Jupiter. But there was another school of thought that says Nibiru can't be Jupiter because we already have multiple names for Jupiter, and Jupiter doesn't fit these qualifiers. And Nibiru was also attached to prophecies about the return of a golden age. So, Phoenix was winged, not Nibiru. More evidence of this is that in ancient Egypt, the winged disc was a black. It was either red or black. This is the phoenix. Darkens the sun. But also, you'll see on the internet everywhere, many depictions of the Egyptian winged disc show two serpent legs coming off of it. Abraxas. Recognition of the two sky dragons that periodically destroy our world. Phoenix was one of them. Yeah, guys, that's it. So, Oh, we're gonna get back to Mero. Yeah, we gotta get to Merodach. That's right. As my boy Martin says, we're about to get to the juicy juicy. Gonna get to the juicy juicy now. Okay. I'm screen sharing again. Berosus, in his later account, says that in the primeval darkness and abyss of waters, there existed monstrous animals of composite form, presided over by Thamti, Tiamat, which being unable to bear the light of the sun were exterminated by Bel Merodach. A reminiscence of these creatures, he adds, survived in the winged bulls and cherubic figures of the monuments and in idols like Dagon, of different animal forms combined. These monsters, it seems, in the new creation were banished to the depths of the ocean, the domain of Tiamat, where in the Bible times they still existed. It's pretty interesting. So what we have here is the admission of basically different fauna that existed, and they were gone, and they were and they were different. They were so alien to the animals that were alive in the days of the post reset period. This is it. Just later, after centuries and centuries, it later became mythological. It later became almost ridiculous. So, let's see. This should be compared to an ancient Babylonian tablet, which says of the conqueror of Tiamat, the creator. This is Merodach. Merodach, a wide space on the face of the deep bound round. He made dust and poured it on the space. The Lord Merodach around the sea made an embankment. All right. I know this sounds very confusing, but it is so simple. There are many depictions of the winged disc on Assyrian and Babylonian reliefs. Many of those depictions on the winged disc show Merodach riding on top of the winged disc. What you have described here is Merodach used the phoenix to deposit dust. This is what it says right here, and this is what the phoenix does. I have a whole playlist showing you all the times Phoenix appears. Its signature characteristic is it bathes our world in red rain, red mud, and red dust. And it always depends on a local humidity as to what falls from the sky. The red dust veils appear around the moon. They fill up the sky. The whole sky becomes red with tendrils of veils of red. This is what the Phoenix does. This is what it did in 1902, as I've shown. Merodach, we have depictions of the winged disc without Merodach on it. But when you see Merodach riding on the back of the winged disc, as it's very popularly shown by Zechariah Siton and a whole bunch of his books, that's Merodach using the phoenix to restore order after this dragon of chaos has totally destroyed everything. This is what Genesis Adam and Eve reset was about. This is why so many ancient traditions link the phoenix to the creation. This is what I've shown in many other presentations, but to see it in this ancient Assyrian text is amazing. Merodach, a wide space on the face of the deep, bound round. He made dust and poured it on the space. The Lord Merodach around the sea made an embankment. It's literally telling us that the world was flooded. The civilization before Adam and Eve was totally wiped out and flooded, and it took the appearance of the phoenix to restore order. In the evening and the morning was the first day. In the evening and the morning was the second day. The phoenix returned in 3895 BC and initiated a recreation. That's what Phoenix is about. Phoenix destroys worlds, but it also reinstates them. And in this incident, something else destroyed the world. And then Phoenix came behind it and restored order. So All right. The symbol of the thunderbolt, resembling two tridents bound together back to back, with which Merodach is depicted on the monuments as overcoming Tiamat, seems to represent lightning streaming from a cloud. So this symbol, I have a lot of material. Here's my book. Here's my hardcover book, Lost Scriptures of Giza, right here. I know I'm sharing the screen, but I have a lot of information in this book about this symbol and how many different gods are depicted holding this. It's called the Vajra, but how are holding it? It is the symbol of the creation and the destruction of worlds. The central pillar is the world axis. The three forks going up represent the three heavens. The three forks going down represent the three compartments of the underworld. What links the heavens to the underworld is Midgard, which is the central axis right here. This is our world. But here it is. It's basically it's basically a symbol for the restoration of the turning of the sky. All right, let's move on. The Chaldean symbol for lightning, and this is evidently only a halving or abbreviated form of the original symbol, the Vajra. It is the flame of the turning weapon which guarded the gate of Eden. So this right here reinforces the scenario of Merodach riding on the phoenix. Remember, we have many winged discs of the Near East and Egypt. They all reference the phoenix. This is the phoenix, not Nibiru. But now we have Merodach riding the phoenix, and these are always references to the creation, the creation of the cosmos, the defeat of the dragon of chaos. He was holding this symbol, the flame of the turning weapon. So this is he did that from the back of the phoenix. This is where in the Old Testament we get the obscure passage concerning God, that he did fly. He did fly upon the back of a cherub. I can't remember where in the Old Testament that is, but it says God did fly on the back of a cherub. It's concerning the creation. So here we have a memorial stone of Merodach-Baladin the First. He is a Babylonian king about the year 1320 BC, not to be confused with Merodach-Baladin the Second, almost 700 years later. So, in the memorial stone of Merodach-Baladin the First, he calls on the infernal deities Ea, Ninip, and Gula, all the gods on this stone tablet whose emblems are seen, violently to destroy the name of him who moves this boundary stone. Among the emblems are the winged dragon, Tiamat, and a horned serpent. This is Smith's Assyrian Discoveries. So a pair of winged dragons are sculpted on the doorway of Sennacherib's palace. Now, also in my book, Lost Scriptures of Giza, I explain the whole concept of the cairn, the Hermian heap, and the boundary stone, and how important they were, and that the ancient Semitic word for monument, pillar, and name are the same, and the word is Shem. This is why I have called Zechariah Siton a deceiver, because he knows by no species of analysis or translation can you ever get rocket ship from the word Shem. Shem meant pillar. Shem meant monument. Shem meant boundary stone. And Shem was a word that also meant name, as in the name of my house. So the reason these words were synonymous in ancient Semitic was because boundary stones were very important as markers of real estate. And so that people passing through would know what land belonged to who, their name was carved into their pillar. So It's basically my shim is upon my shim. My name is on my monument. So memorial stones, I mean, you could have got executed for moving somebody's boundary stone in ancient times. So the memorial stone of Merodach-Baladin the First, he puts a curse on it on anybody who moves moves the stone. But this was a title. His name wasn't really Merodach. His name was Baladin the First. But by using the word Merodach as his shim, as his name, he bought into an entire belief system we'll be getting into here. I'm going to make you understand what the full implications of this curse were. Let's move on. So the apocalyptic dragon is cast down, announcing woe in Revelation 12:12. It is the symbol of worldly pride and tumultuous rebellion, of confusion and anarchy. Here are the verses in the Bible talking about how this dragon of chaos is the origin of our oceans today. These are the verses that talk about thou rulest the pride of the sea. This is in the book of Psalms. We are now in a position to understand the full mystical significance of the otherwise enigmatic statement with which the book of Revelation closes, that this dark image of sin and disorder, which has marred the earth from its very foundation, will have no place in the renovated world. In the new heaven and the new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness, there will be, look, there will be no more sea. We're talking about a future period in the world where there will be no more oceans, because the presence of oceans in our world today are evidence of a fallen world destroyed by cataclysm. This isn't the original biosphere. This is the biosphere after the heavens collapsed. Not once, but multiple times, and deposited these saltwater brine oceans that don't belong here. Saltwater seas belong here, but not these oceans. The world will be restored. The origin of the sea is the dragon Tiamat, the seven-headed dragon of chaos. So, all right, let's go with nothing seems known of the mysteries of the dragon, which formed a part of the Eleusinian Rite. This is ancient Greece. Check this out. I didn't mean to read that. That had nothing to do with this. I'm telling you about the origin of Santa Claus. Look at this. This is amazing. This dude threw this in here. Old Nick. Check this out. Old Nick is a name for the devil in folk speech. Was originally Old English Nickor, a water demon. What? Old Nick is the description of a water demon in Old England, in Old English. Further proof of this is right here. But in the Anglo-Saxon poem Beowulf, on the waves slew the Nickers by night. Sea dragons and Nickers. Nick was a devil, a water devil. This goes back to Grimm, Teutonic myth, the year 1604. This dude reached way back and pulled this data out there. Old Nick. So the church took Old Nick and turned him into Old Saint Nicholas. Waited a couple hundred years and created Saint Nicholas as Santa Claus. But the fact, it's thrown in your face, the fact that Old Nick comes from a demon is found in Santa Claus, because Santa is an anagram for Satan. It's amazing. You can't make this shit up. So I love reading these old books. I find all these little gems like that. I'm researching something else. So moving on. Here we have 1897. We find out that the Babylonian records concerning the Anunna-Gi. This is it. This isn't Anunnaki. This is the Anunna-Gi right here. The records of the Anunna-Gi, or masters of the underworld. This is what I've been telling you guys since the inception of my channel. The Anunna were technologically advanced. When these sky dragons appear, they know it. They predict it every time. When these sky dragons appear, they go to the underworld. The survivors on the surface even remember that the prior race that was destroyed went to the underworld. Every time. When Enki appeared with 50 Anunna, they had come from the deep. Who was Enki? He was Lord of the Deep. He came from the underworld, and in the 35th century BC, unleashed all that technology and just it's amazing, guys. You just can't make this stuff up. When you study chronological systems, calendars, timekeeping systems, chronal markers, and you put all this together like I have, and you put together a chronicon that covers 7,344 years of recorded human history, everything falls into place where it's supposed to go, and it all makes sense. You don't need any of this woo-woo crap that these people are steadily pumping out. You don't need it. Just don't need it. There it is, Anunna-Gi, lords of the subterranean water. Now, I'm going to show you something right here on the bottom. It was these Anunna-Gi, or lords of the subterranean water, who brought the flood over the earth, according to the deluge tablets. Listen, guys, the Karsag tablets, it's really interesting here. This is really interesting because this is how a primitive people using more primitive frames of reference would have remembered a more technologically advanced period where advanced people, gods, predicted a coming cataclysm and went to the underworld to escape it. But after the cataclysm, without technology, without a memory of how sophisticated things actually were, the gods didn't predict anything. They made it happen. That's how these things get contorted. And this is because, like I opened this video up with, the reason we have these primitive versions of more sophisticated histories recorded in this way is because everything in the historical record is written ex post facto. That's why. Because in Assyrian belief, as Lenormand has noticed, evil beings had their habitual residence in uncultivated wilds and deserts, from which they wandered into inhabited places to torment mankind. Accordingly, there were special exorcisms with a view to sending them back to those dreary solitudes. Indeed, there was a general belief in Syria as well as Chaldea and Mesopotamia that demons inhabited the desert. And there is ample evidence that the Jews inherited the same notion. Why am I telling you this? Because in my published books and on my channel, I showed you guys the book of Genesis and the covenant attached to Abraham is not the same as the book of Exodus and the covenant attached to Yahweh. In the book of Genesis, we find that Abraham separated himself from the dungeon programming everybody else was involved in the worship of all these idols. Abraham realized that God was of heaven. Abraham is attached to a covenant that is very different, with promises and prophecies that are very different than that of Yahweh, who popped out of a burning bush in the middle of a desert. I've even showed you guys in my Dark Scriptures playlist that the Bible even identifies Yahweh himself as a demon. You can't make this stuff up. And I didn't say this. I use Scripture to interpret Scripture. It's all there. So, yeah, the God of Abraham is not the God of Moses. They are totally different. And remember, from the very beginning in Genesis, the tree of knowledge of good and evil automatically shows that the book of good and evil, the Bible, possesses two narratives. It's up to you spiritually to choose which narrative you want to follow, because one of them is going to lead to the absolute empowerment of the divine immortal who understands that this is a construct. The other narrative is going to give you all the benefits of the construct and ensure that you stay trapped within it forever. Remember, the covenant of Yahweh, there isn't a single promise of heaven. It's not there. So, did I skip one? Did I skip? Hold on, because okay, no, that's good. That's Lenormand. All right. Now, we're almost done, guys. It is strange and interesting to find the nations long scattered abroad upon the face of all the earth, thus turning their faces back again to Babel, and finding there a point of union and kinship. All right, guys. In the days of Abraham, we have in a syllabus. That syllabus, this is what's intriguing. That syllabus was that in ancient times, mankind built a structure, a tower to heaven to oppose the gods. And the gods were so alarmed. They looked down on the construct and realized that what mankind was doing. And they said, oh, wow, wait a minute. Mankind has become so creative and imaginative that there is nothing that he cannot accomplish. Meaning that inside the construct, humans can do great things. We can do all kinds of things. We can even breach the construct. That story was very popular in the days of Abram. 1947 BC was when he was born. However, when the Jews were captives of the Babylonians and they were going through their libraries, they came across that story. And because it was Babylon and Babel, they associated the Tower of Babel story to Babylon. And it was the wrong thing to do because that story was far more ancient. The story of the Tower of Babel didn't happen in the Near East. It didn't happen in the Euphrates-Tigris basin. It happened in Egypt. The true Babel and the true architectural project that was being built that alarmed the construct, that alarmed the gods, and for which they could not allow the final stone to be set in place. So therefore, the chief cornerstone became the stone the builders rejected. They would not allow that last piece to be emplaced because something would happen to the construct that could not be undone. And to prevent it from being finished, they scattered all the people. The true scattering of all the languages and all that could only be done in a construct. Only in a simulation can somebody program, like the Hunger Games, when they're in the observation deck and they use a computer to create a monster. And if you believe that monster is real, it can kill you in the battle dome. It's the same concept. Only using programming can someone alter the way humans communicate. And they did that. And it created all these different language, different speech patterns and dialects to where it created so much confusion. Humans couldn't finish the project. They couldn't finish the project. So this is the Great Pyramid project, but it was finished. The construct waited too long. The building was finished. And what Artificial Intelligence X didn't realize at the time is that the holy work was completed and it was done. because the structure itself was never meant for the world that built it. It was meant for a future generation when that technology of the Great Pyramid would be used. But we're not going to get into that. That's what my Great Pyramid playlist is about. I just wanted to show you, but right here, I thought it was very interesting that he would mention the whole Babel deal, and because he's focusing on all the beliefs that were extant during Abraham's day, and this is where the confusion was introduced. The book of Genesis, written by the Jews over 13 centuries after Abraham was even reading and learning about the Tower of Babel, had actually dated the Tower of Babel to Abraham's life. And it's not true. It was already an ancient story when Abraham was alive, because it concerns what happened in pre-flood Egypt. All right, now. See here. Done. Stop sharing my screen. So we have to wonder. I mean, we have to wonder why was it so alarming? Who cares if you put your name on a boundary stone? Who cares if you say this is my monumental stone, this is my boundary stone. I'm putting my name on here, Baladin the First, and I'm carving the name of Merodach on my stone. Why? Why was it so important to do that? I'm going to tell you why. You see, we're tapping into an ancient mindset, just like today. Many Christians, well, man, don't be around a Christian and use Jesus' name in vain. You know what I mean? Even when people do that around me, I'm not even a Christian on that level. But I'm going to tell you now, when people say Jesus' name in vain, I kind of cringe, like, oh man, we all do. Some spiritual within us, like, man, you know what? That's not even cool doing that. But people, Muslims aren't going to say Muhammad's name in vain. They're not going to say anything in vain about Allah. They're not going to. They're going to inwardly cringe too. It's a spiritual deal. It's just, in ancient times, Merodach was the same way. Merodach defeats Tiamat. And the curse of Merodach-Baladin recognizes that a benefactor, Merodach, has already defeated the forces of darkness of the world before, had brought paradise out of ruin, had subdued the dragon of destruction, and brought forth a whole new race to replace the ancient ones, and did this by virtue of a powerful weapon. One of the sins of the ancient ones was removing the old boundary stones. Do you get my meaning here? Thus, Merodach's name carried the promise of revenge against evil and one's access to paradise beyond death in the new heavens and new earth. Therefore, when Merodach-Baladin the First in 1320 carved his name and inscribed a boundary stone, he knew he had the full force of Merodach's power to enforce a curse that would completely obliterate the offender. This was the mindset of the ancient world. This is why they put their names on things. This is why they raise their boundary stones. You can even look in the Old Testament and use a Strong's Concordance and look up stones, boundary stones, name, monument, and you'll see that there's curses in the Old Testament for people who meddle with those things. Yeah, it's all very interesting. So I'm going to bring this to your attention too. That there's a book I can't remember. Oh, Zechariah Siton wrote it. Zechariah Siton wrote Genesis Revisited. But in that book, he makes a really good, solid point that I want to draw attention to. I'm a critic, of course I am, but I've already shown you on my channel in hundreds of presentations that I have found great value even in authors I totally disagree with. But this is one. Zechariah Siton showed that in the Genesis creation account, according to the Yabashah, which is a Talmudic or rabbinical text, in the Yabashah account that breaks down and interprets the book of Genesis, it literally says that Genesis 1, where it says where the waters were gathered in one place, it literally says dried out land masses, meaning that the Adam and Eve destruction was literally a reset. It was a recreation of a pre-existing world that had been totally flooded out and destroyed. This is a flood way before the Gihon flood. This is a flood way before Noah's flood, and even way before the Ogygian deluge. So I thought that was really interesting too. But it's let me move this, get this out of the way. All right, put back here. Every time I do these videos, man, I'm hungry as hell by the time I'm done. I guess I'm burning calories while I'm talking. Guys, 2 hours and 28 minutes. I didn't know it was going to be that long, but that is my presentation on the curse of Merodach-Baladin the First, 1320 BC, and the importance of that, and this amazing book from 1897 right here. You can easily get it from my publisher. I don't make any money off this at all. But you can easily get this book right here from my publisher. I only accentuated the highlights. This book is packed full of data. It is packed full of data. And the source materials in the back are things you can follow and chase. It's good stuff. But 1-800-700-TREE. That's my publisher, and you can order this book from him. It's cheap. He's got about 600 very cheap books that are all facsimiles of old text. His catalog has like 2,000 to 3,000 books, but he's a reprints publisher. A lot of my education came from the books. As a matter of fact, if you're interested in my source materials and a lot of the things that where I derive my education from, at the Book Tree in San Diego, you can call him, Paul Tice, 1-800-700-TREE, and just ask, hey, what kind of books are on Jason's shelf? Because there's I went there and I put together that shelf myself, and it's got 2 full huge shelves called Jason's shelf. Those are all the books I highly recommend for all kinds of topics. I read every single one of them. They're in my bibliography. So yeah, guys, that's my presentation. Hope you liked it. And we got more amazing presentations on the way. But this is a good book. I'm very impressed with Palmer. And that's 1-800-700-TREE. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, guys. Oh, and do me a favor. Anybody in the Houston area or surrounding, you want to come? Time's clicking on March 30th this month. Man, we're going to get together. We're going to have a blast. We're going to get together for about 9 hours, and we're going to have a blast. We already got the huge room already rented. And so you guys know how we do it. Every time we do the Houston meetup, it's all informal, and we just have a lot of fun. But if somebody posts that link to the meetup, please, I'd appreciate it. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and hit this outro, and I appreciate you guys for stopping by. If I can't even find my own outro sometimes.